with me. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou katoa. Ko Waio no Ōtautahi tōku whaia, no America tōku mātua, ngō te papaioia ahau, kei te whanganui a tara taku wahi kāinga I nei, ko te tangata tiriti ahau, nō reira tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. So I'm here to talk about behaviour change, social marketing, and I'm going to sort of use those terms interchangeably, and as we go I'll try and sort of explain why that is, and I'll hopefully bring you all with me. I'm going to try my best to leave time for questions at the end. There's a little bit of a logical flow to how this stacks up. Oh look, that's someone's alarm clock, thank you. Wake yourself up. And yeah, so I'm going to kind of try and get through it end to end and see how we go. The one thing I do want to say is a little bit of like credentials for why it is that I'm here talking to you about social marketing. And in doing so, maybe give you a flavour of what sorts of programs social marketing is commonly kind of deployed for. But also keep your mind open, because behaviour change is a much broader church than just this kind of program. But over the years I've worked on a positive parenting program called SKIP, family violence program called It's Not Okay. You might have heard of Sorted. I'm going to talk about that a little bit in a moment, which is a financial kind of literacy and kind of retirement savings program, a little bit of sexual health and well-being, a little bit of mental health, some alcohol moderation and some biosecurity stuff. I've also worked in road safety and smoking cessation and a bunch of other things over the years. So it's through all of my years of working on these programs that I have, and through my engagement with the social marketing community and kind of learning as I've gone, that is the insight that I'm bringing to this. I was lucky enough over the years to go to a few kind of international conferences and stuff like that. Unlike someone in this room, I don't have a qualification on the subject, so I'm really looking forward to talking to you later and sharing insights as well. Just one more little sort of framing thought. So how I came to this, given that I don't have an education in it. My background is in comms. I was a communications consultant for a long time. And such a long time, in fact, that my social marketing story starts in 1999, after I'd been in comms for a good few years already. And in 1999, I was working with the Retirement Commission on something called Welcome to Your Retirement. And what we were trying to do was encourage New Zealanders to make voluntary private provision for their retirement. Now, at that time, if you can even imagine 1999, there was no KiwiSaver. There were no kind of mechanisms really for people to make voluntary retirement savings except for kind of your bank account. And also there was universal superannuation, which there still is now, but there was a greater sense that that was going to be a safety net, which meant that we needed nothing else. At a government level, though, there was this growing realisation that actually superannuation, national super is not going to be enough to give you the lifestyle that you want. And so they commissioned us, when I was at the agency that I was at, to do a program to make people understand that national super wouldn't be enough to support them in their lifestyle. So we created this thing called Welcome to Your Retirement, and we created these little mini documentaries, commercial length documentaries, where we found out what people's lives were like, what their money situation was like, and then we showed them what their life, and then we put that on TV. And it was freaking terrifying. You know, it's like it was a bleak picture. And we did some research and we discovered that, lots of people had seen the ads, and heaps of people got the key message, right, that they were going to be in trouble in retirement, and almost nobody had any intention to do anything about it. And we were like, oh, we'll have to shout louder then, you know. Valley people. About that time, the company I used to work for, Logos Public Relations, got bought by Whānau Valley, a big international company, and there was a guy at Whānau Valley in the States called Ed Maybach, Dr. Ed Maybach, who was a social marketing expert. I'd never heard of social marketing. And he started to talk to us about behaviour change being quite a distinct practice, and the sorts of aspects and features of it that might make you help people not just hear your message but actually act on it. And so that's where my practice kind of started. And Sorted is what evolved out of those lessons that we learnt from Ed Maybach in those really early days. So we realised that we did some more research and found out that actually people didn't want to hear about retirement. Retirement was like that very word, which is awkward, right, because our client was the Retirement Commission, but that very word was a turn-off for people. For young people, it was a turn-off because completely irrelevant. For older people, a turn-off because frankly terrifying. And there was kind of no middle ground. And so we realised, using our social marketing kind of lessons, that trying to talk to people about retirement was going to actually generate the very response we were getting, which was the walls up, you know, la, 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 I can't hear you. And so that's when we shifted and started talking about, what we found out from our research was that people did want to get their money sorted. And actually, if you help people get their money sorted, then they will be in better shape for their retirement. And so we completely shifted the focus of what we were doing and created the program Sorted, which dates back to, I think, 2000 or 2001, is still alive today. If you want to get sorted on money matters, was our first kind of strapline, use your mouse, because in those days, websites were really new. So it's pretty cool. Yeah, that was where the mouse came from. Anyway, so that's just a little bit of a framing thought for you. Someone asked before, and I will say these slides, for what they're worth, will be available. So if you want them, I'll share them with the collective, and they'll find their way to you. All right, so what we're going to talk about today is, thinking about change and what it is about change. Why does it matter? Why am I talking to you about change? Why are you here listening to a conversation about change? I'm going to define social marketing as a distinctive practice, and then I'm going to talk about 3 success factors. Now, there's more than that, right? Social marketing as a practice and its adjacent practices is way more complex. We've got an hour. I'm focusing on 3, okay? So it's good though. They're a good 3. And we might get to what could possibly go wrong if we still have time. But I'll probably talk about it a little bit as we go. Thinking about change. Why does change matter? I mean, the proposition I want to put to you is almost everything we do in communications, we want people to do something that they're not currently doing. We don't often confront that fact, right? Because we're communicators. We talk and we listen. You know, it's a two-way, I'll give you that. But on the whole, we put information out. And then we trust that people will do the right thing with that information. The problem, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more, is that that's kind of not necessarily enough to make people make changes. And I don't think as communicators we often focus enough on the fact that actually what we want is not for people to know something, but actually for people to do something. And if when you think about what you're communicating about and what your programs are and focus on what it is that you might want people to do, all of a sudden everything gets a lot harder. It's really easy to communicate with people and then prove that you've communicated and prove that they got the message. It's so much harder to get people to do something. So if you go through the process of going, actually, yes, I do want people to do something, and then you go through the process of attempting to get them to do that thing or not to do a thing, conversely, the usual tools of comms are not enough to create the change we need, and that's where social marketing comes in. So that's kind of the premise of kind of why we're here and why I'm so excited about social marketing after all of these years and why I'm still talking about it. The usual tools of communications are not enough, generally, to generate change. Why is that? Because change is hard, right? And we know that. It's a fundamental kind of human condition. Change is hard. Otherwise, we wouldn't set New Year's resolutions every single year. It would have been enough when we turned 21 to decide how we wanted to be as adults and just, cool, job done, change is hard. And here's another problem that we've got. Information is only the solution if a lack of information was the problem. Most of the time, people behave the way they do, whether it is not getting enough exercise or smoking or any of the things that they do that we might think that they shouldn't do from a social good perspective or from an individual good perspective. Most of the time they know, right? People who smoke know it's going to kill them. So telling them it's going to kill them isn't necessarily going to make them stop. They're already in possession of that information. Most people know what a healthy diet looks like, most people. There are other reasons why they don't have a healthy diet. Most of the people in this room probably know that it is good for adults to get 30 minutes of exercise a day. I want to propose that a good, healthy percentage of the people in this room probably even intend to get 30 minutes of exercise a day. But I bet you a smaller percentage than that again actually does. And that's why A, change is hard, and B, information, the usual tool of communicators, just isn't enough. So yeah, Utah poison control reminds everyone not to take poison. No, I mean, come on. Oh good, I forgot. Don't poison my children. All right, so, and here's just one more little kind of data point on this. So education or information can be enough if you've got a group of people who are already prone to behave the way you want them to, but they just don't know a thing, right? So for example, in some instances and in some cultures, mothers of new babies might be prone to information about how to prevent sudden infant death syndrome. If you just give them that information, that will be enough, they will do it. That information isn't going to be enough in other cultures, by the way, where, for example, co-sleeping is culturally really, really important. So you have to really, we're going to talk a little bit about really understanding the people you're dealing with. But in some instances, yeah, okay, information's going to be enough. At the audience who are utterly resistant to the behaviour, absolutely never going to do it no matter what tools you give them, no matter how much you do to convince them, no matter how many times you tell them. And for them, maybe enforcement is going to be what you need. And that's why we need, actually speed cameras, for example, right? So that kind of tool is really useful for people who've got no interest in behaving the way you want them to behave. Everything in the middle, and that's where we come to this practice called social marketing. So people who are not necessarily absolutely able to do it the minute you just give them the right information, and not necessarily the people who are never going to do it no matter what you do for them. Alrighty. So what is social marketing? Over the years there have been heaps of definitions of it. My personal favourite is one of the very earliest ones. If you've ever done any marketing, Bill Kotler, can't remember Roberto's first name, but anyway, these guys are the granddaddies of social marketing. They come from an advertising and marketing background, but then one day, they're American, they woke up and went, hey, what if we use these techniques to actually solve social problems, not just sell cat food? And so they thought, okay, there's a difference, but it could be really useful. And so they came up with this definition, a program planning process that promotes the voluntary behaviour of target audiences by offering benefits they want, reducing barriers they're concerned about, and using persuasion to motivate their participation, right? So it's about getting people to voluntarily change their behaviour. A program approach is really important, right? It's not just stick an ad on the telly. It's not just, put out a leaflet. It's a strategy, it's a program. And importantly, offering benefits they want and reducing barriers they're concerned about. And we're going to talk about that, right? This is persuasion. This is convincing people, not just telling them. Yep. So some of you, Social marketing is a big school, and there are lots of adjacent things. So health promotion, people talk about, it's not really social marketing, but it's absolutely aligned. There are some differences. One of the definitions of social marketing I quite like is consumer-oriented health promotion. So it's really deeply understanding the needs of a consumer, which is a marketing concept, right? So one of the ones that gets talked about quite a lot, and some of you might have heard about it, is the stages of change. Prochaska and De Clemente, they talk about being, the phrases you might have heard is pre-contemplative and contemplative and all of those things going through the cycle of change. I don't like Prochaska and De Clemente's work for social marketing purposes. They wrote it for creating individual behaviour change. So they did not for one-on-one. If you've got someone with an addiction, you'll use it when you're working with them one-on-one. But it gets used a lot, so I mention it. If you've heard of it, I put your little red flag up and go, let's talk about social marketing instead, eh? Behavioural economics, terribly fashionable for a time, especially in the early 2010s. It was popularised by the book Nudge by Thaler and Sunstein. Good book, recommend it. In a way, they are just the guys who had economics degrees that discovered that maybe people aren't quite rational and maybe we need to think about them differently. So, I mean, congratulations to them, but marketers have known that for a really, really long time. Combi is an awesome model. I've put these up here because if you're interested, these are all worth exploring in one way or another. Combi is a lovely model that just helps kind of acknowledge the external influences on human behaviour, not just the internal influences. We'll talk about all these things a bit as we go. Marketing, this is, so comms people, we know marketing people as well. Some of us are both, right? My dad used to be a professor of marketing, and I think that might be one of the reasons why I was kind of drawn to social marketing, and it sort of made sense to me. I didn't realise I'd sort of been fed consumer orientation with my Weet-Bix probably. But marketing has 4 Ps, product, price, place, promotion. And you think about those 4 Ps when you're thinking about what's your program going to be. They added 2 extra Ps to create social marketing, which was people and policy. Because you have to think about all the people that influence the behaviour, you have to think about the policies that might change it. But that's a really cool way to think about it, because if you think about it, product, price, place, promotion, us comms people often only come at it from a promotion point of view, right? So what happens to what you're trying to do if you also think about product? What's the product I'm trying to sell? Price, how much does it cost people to do the thing? Place, where is it? How am I making it easy or available or accessible for them? And these are kind of mind-blowing things to think about when you're thinking about social behaviour changes, right? But if you think about the 4 Ps, for example, from the point of view of maybe wearing correct PPE on an industrial site or something like that, so for health and safety, the product that I'm trying to sell them is wearing correct PPE, or maybe it's actually the correct PPE itself. You can think about it in different ways. Price, what is it costing them to wear correct PPE? Maybe it's inconvenience. Maybe they're in a hurry. Maybe they're under pressure in the workplace to get things done quickly. Maybe it's not available. Maybe they left it at home. These are all of the things that create the price for doing the behaviour. Place. Where am I making the PPE available, or where am I putting the messages about having PPE? All of those things. And you weigh up all of those things when you think about how am I going to then sell them the behaviour of wearing the correct PPE. So that's a quick rocket through the 4 Ps. And then there's this lovely, lovely process here called community-based social marketing. Doug Mackenzie-Moore, well worth looking up if you're not already across him. He's a Canadian social marketer, works mostly in the environmental space, but he is so all about the behaviour, which I love, and he has these very accessible resources and things. He's kind of marvellous. So that's a quick rock through some of the models. But what I've done for the purposes of today's presentation is kind of almost all of these, less so stages of change because I've already been disrespectful of that one, but they all kind of have 3 things in common. So it's those 3 things that I'm going to really focus on today. These are my proposition, the 3 elements of successful practice. So, and I'll talk about each of these in turn, so I won't spend time on them now particularly, but first of all, behaviour focus. Focus on the behaviour that you want people to do, and I've already touched on this, not just what you want them to know or think. Audience orientation, truly understanding what are those. Remember, Kotler and Roberto talked about kind of barriers and motivators. What are those? And then taking a systematic, strategic approach. So under the heading of what can go wrong, over the years, so many times, I worked when I was a consultant with clients who would go, right, well, we need people to do a thing, so we'll just make a brochure, or we'll just, if they've got more money, put an ad on TV, or we'll just create a viral campaign. So they leap from the problem to a solution without really thinking deeply about how do we understand the problem, what's the system that the problem exists within. So systemic, strategic approach. Alrighty, so I'm going to go through each of these one by one. I'm going to start with the behaviour, because that's where we often start when we're thinking about our programs. So this is what's the problem we're trying to solve. And a lot of my references in this talk are kind of those big social behaviour changes, but whatever your organisation is, whatever comms you're doing, it doesn't have to be one of those big behaviours. Think about, what is the behaviour that I want people to change? What do I want people to do as a result of my engagement with them? These resources I'm expending on communicating with people, on reaching out to people, what do I expect to happen as a result of that? That's what I mean. Really think about, what do I want people to do? What's the behaviour? And the reason this matters is because of a thing called the knowledge fallacy. So this is the idea that if we increase people's knowledge, they will change their attitudes, and if we change their attitudes, they will change their behaviour. Now there's heaps and heaps of data that shows that, yep, the connection between knowledge and attitude is reasonably strong. It is true that if you successfully improve people's knowledge on a topic, it can, and often does, lead to a change in their attitudes about that topic. But the barrier, the link between attitude and behaviour is exceptionally weak. And when I come to talk about audience, I'll talk a little bit more about why that is. But for now, just accept that link between attitude and behaviour is really, really weak. And so that means that we can't, if we want behaviour, if we want change, we can't make our starting point information, increasing people's knowledge. We have to make our starting point, what is the behaviour we want to change, and how can we understand that behaviour? This is just to prove my point. That's a kind of a big meta survey that they did, where they looked at, kind of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of programs to figure out what works to change behaviour. And they were just like, yep, absolutely, there is a link between knowledge and attitudes. And this is why, if you're lucky enough to have a budget for research, you will often find after you've done something that, you have succeeded in increasing people's knowledge, maybe about the opportunity to donate to your charity, but that doesn't necessarily mean they then donate. Like, they know it, but they don't necessarily do it. So if you focus on what might make them know it, you are not doing the job you need to do. All right, here's another challenge with setting behavioural goals, because what I'm basically urging you to do is set some behavioural goals. What is it you want people to do? Make that your goal. Focus on that. Focus on understanding how to do that. Little bit of a problem with it. Usually, for anything that you want, there's a bunch of different behaviours that you want from people. And when you really break it down, you realise, oh my God, I want a lot from them. And I don't necessarily have a lot of resource to get that. And they don't necessarily have a lot of resource to do that, because people's lives are complex. But nonetheless, start by acknowledging the universe of possible behaviours that you want. Doug Mackenzie Moore, who I mentioned before, says in the environmental space alone, there are literally hundreds of behaviours that we want from people to make them kind of perfect environmental citizens. You're not going to have enough resource to get them to do hundreds of things. They're not going to have the capacity to do hundreds of things. So the respectful thing to do is to choose. Is for you to choose What is the behaviour you are most likely to be able to get them to do? What is the behaviour that is going to have the greatest impact if they do it? So step one, notice that universe of possible behaviours. And I've got in there just a few like little examples with my excellent clip art of what they could be. And then this little tool, again, Mackenzie Moore, is just a little technique for then sorting those behaviours. So if you make a list of all of the possible behaviours that you want, and then this can work in the area of donating to your organisation, it can work in the area of stopping smoking, it can work in the area of family violence, you know, it works anywhere. What are all of the things that you could possibly want people to do? And then use this kind of grid of probability, so that's what are people most likely to adopt, and impact, what's going to have the biggest impact on the problem I'm trying to solve. So for example, road safety. If the big problem is road safety, we just want people to drive safely, that's not an end-state, non-divisible behaviour, right? There's a lot of behaviours bundled in there. So first step, notice the universe of possible behaviours. Slow down, wear your seatbelt, don't drink and drive. You know, have a nominated driver, have a safe car, you know, or have the proper licence. All of those. Some of those are easier for people to do, and some of them are harder. So the ease of doing is the probability, probably. What are they more likely to adopt? And then which are going to have the biggest impact on the problem you're trying to solve. That's where you can look at data, right? So if we take the road safety example, there'll be data about which of those things I just listed has the biggest impact on harm on the roads. From memory from my days working in road safety, it was speed. So you'd put slow down right up high in terms of impact, but maybe not very high in terms of probability, right? And then that gives you a sense of what you might tackle. Obviously, the thing you want to tackle is the thing top right, because, is that right? Yeah. Because that's highest probability and highest impact. Hardly ever do you find things in that portion of the grid, unfortunately. But you might find things that are high probability that you might tackle anyway. So, and one of the things Mackenzie Moore says, if you're choosing, if there isn't anything in that sweet spot on the grid, choose things that are high probability, because it's good to get people kind of engaged in the little easy behaviours, because then you've got them, and hopefully it's more easy for them to do a little bit more, or a little bit something else. Right, so that's just a little bit of thought about behaviours, but my big key message to you there is it isn't enough to think about knowledge alone. Think about what we want people to know. It's not enough to think about even what we want people to feel. We have to think about what do we want people to do, and then of those many things, choose one or a few to focus on. And then when we focus on those, what do we need to do? Well, we need to think about, why do people currently do the things we don't want them to do, or why don't they do the things we do want them to do? What's going on? Because as I said before, if a lack of information isn't a problem, then information isn't going to be the solution. Right? So we have to find out what the problem is. Why aren't they doing what we need to do? So respect your audience's reality, right? Understand your audience's reality and respect it. So first of all, understand who you need to reach. So who are they? Can you segment them? So if you think about the behaviour you're trying to change, who is more likely to be doing the behaviour you don't want, or who is more likely to adopt the behaviour you do want? So think about, you're never going to have enough resources to get to every single New Zealander. So really think deeply about who. And then know what they care about. So learn about their world, and not just their world with reference to the thing you want them to achieve, but their world generally. And then care about what they care about, right? Don't judge them. I remember when I was working on the It's Not Okay program, family violence, and I had to work quite hard not to apply judgments to the people who we were trying to change. And it's genuinely important, because as long as you're judging them, you are never going to understand them. So, and it's really easy when you're a subject matter expert, right? And heaps of us, but also heaps of the people we're working with in our organisations are deeply expert on the topic, and it makes it really hard to see anybody who isn't doing the right thing in relation to that topic in a way that isn't judgmental, right? So I used to work in the environmental space, and people would be like, but everybody knows that you've got to recycle. I can't remember what the conversation actually was, but you know, like, so they're just lazy. Well, the minute you find yourself in that mindset, you are not going to be able to reach them. Yep. So, yeah. I want to give an example about knowing what they care about and thinking about that not from the point of view of kind of necessarily your topic, but in terms of them as whole humans. There's an example, which is a program that Ed Maybeck, who was my kind of first mentor in this space, worked on. And it was a program to get middle school kids to exercise more. The problem that they had was these kids were kind of becoming largely inactive, you know, too much screen time, you know, and all of that. And they wanted to get them more active in that after school time. So that was the kind of the hypothesis, the program was, the behaviour change they wanted was get them more active after school. And so they did some research, and but they didn't just go, hey, what would make you be active? They went, hey, tell us about after school. And what they found out from these kids was that after school was the only time in their day when they were free. So from the minute they got up in the morning till the minute they went to bed at night, someone was telling them what to do, right? Get up, get your lunchbox, get your, you know, get ready, brush your teeth, right? Get in the school bus, get off to school, and then at school, obviously regimented. And then this brief little hiatus of joyous freedom in the afternoon when they could do whatever they wanted, and then parents are home, right, have your dinner, do your homework, you know, again, you can only have so much television and off to bed at the right time. And so that what this program would have done if it hadn't done this research, and if it hadn't done the research in the way it did it, was try to regiment the only part of the day when there was no regimenting. And you can imagine how that would have been received by the young people. Absolutely no thank you. This is my free time. And so they completely rethought how they went about that program with that understanding. So they went about it from the point of view of really understanding you are the king of your own universe in this time. How are you going to be that king? Because the research also showed them that they did have some residual dissatisfaction. They were getting home, sitting in dad's chair, putting it back, watching television, because that was kind of the only thing they really knew how to do, but it didn't feel quite like enough. So they tapped into that to create their program. So understand beyond. Don't just ask them, what would make you exercise after school? If you ask people a rational question, they will give you a rational answer. It won't necessarily be right. And so, to that point, you have to really think about people differently. So this is a little bit of, you know, Freud here. I'm not a psychologist, but the idea here is that all of us have our conscious mind, our rational mind. That's what we can tell you about, right? So if you say to me, why do you drink too much wine? I'll try and come up with an answer from my rational mind, right? I'll justify it, I'll rationalise it, I'll give you an answer. But actually the reasons why we behave the way we behave, why do you not get enough exercise? I'll say I'm too lazy, I like my sleep-ins, or I don't know what. But the behaviour is actually driven from here, not here, for almost every human, for almost every behaviour. Right? And if we don't trouble ourselves to go into this unconscious, subconscious and unconscious space, we will not find out what's truly driving the behaviour. And so for those kids after school, for example, if you'd said to them, why aren't you exercising? They'd have gone, oh, nah, I don't like exercise, or something like that. Because that will be what came to their mind. Not necessarily true. Doesn't make them liars, doesn't make us liars when we offer the answer that's available to us. It just means that we're not always actually connected to the real reasons why we behave the way we behave. And our behaviour is driven by a whole bunch of other things, some of them really primal. So here is a little sample of some of them. Social norms and herding is massive, massive for why people behave the way they behave. It is very important to humans to be part of the pack. It's a safety mechanism. Social approval, status and reward, not one we're going to admit to, by the way, very often, because it's kind of frowned on, and yet often a massive driver for behaviour. Fear and shame about doing the wrong thing or being in the wrong, comfort and safety. Kind of connected to Maslow's hierarchy in some ways, right? And again, not necessarily what you're going to own up to if you're asked a direct and rational question. You'll give a direct and rational answer when in fact why you're behaving the way you're behaving is coming from down here. So if we want to identify behaviour, change a behaviour, we have to understand what are the real barriers and motivators that sit below the surface for why I'm not doing the thing you want me to do, or why I am doing the thing you wish I wouldn't. So, the 4 most beautiful words in social marketing. We did some research. Now this is tricky, particularly in the community sector, right? Because research is often expensive. I'm going to talk about research, including the expensive kind, but it is possible to still do versions of it that cost less. The worst thing you could do would be to go, I can't afford to do research and just not do anything. The best thing you could do would be to go, well, somehow I have to find out about my audience. How am I going to do it? Right, and find a way, partner with some academics or something, right? Anecdote to help you think about why I made the point, but it's one of the most important points for social marketing. For a minute. Imagine that you work for an NGO that works in the environmental space and you want people to stop buying tuna because the tuna fishery is overfished and it's bad and you don't want it. You don't want them to do it. And you're trying to think about who is our target audience. And so you go, okay, well obviously household shoppers, yes, good starting point. They're the ones that are buying the tuna. Stands to reason they're the ones who also have the ability to stop buying the tuna. Okay, cool. So you've got to break that down too, because that's too many people. So you have a little look and you come across me. That's not me, that's bread I baked. Thank you very much. So you see that I'm a household shopper and I've got a bit of a social conscience. I like to bake bread, not just because it's therapeutic, but also because it means that I'm not buying bread that comes in plastic. And this is good, and you found that out about me, and you go, cool. You've also found out that I buy tuna, but you think, okay, this is awesome, because she cares about the environment, and so we'll just tell her that she shouldn't buy tuna because it's bad to buy tuna, and she won't buy tuna. So you go, cool, okay, I've done a little bit of research, and I found some things out, and this is going to work. You're also about to find out that I buy this on a weekly basis, which is terrible, right? And then you go, oh, okay, so let's forget about the tuna for a second and say we need to stop her from buying single-use plastic. So you change, you've got me in your sights now, and you go, cool, I know that you're environmentalists, let's forget about the tuna for a minute, focus on single-use plastic, and I'm going to stop her from buying single-use plastics, and I'll tell her that it's not a good idea for the environment because I know she cares about the environment because she bakes her own bread in order not to use the plastic. So this is cool. You got me, right? I'm going to go, oh, yeah, sorry about that. Better not buy chocolate milk anymore. Do you think that will work? No. Any ideas why that might not work?
Chocolate milk is good.
Because chocolate is good, that's right, yeah. And here's the thing. You don't know why I buy chocolate milk, and it could be because chocolate milk's good.
You're buying it for someone else.
I'm buying it for this guy. And this guy finishes his football training and hops in the car, and if I've got a little bottle of cold chocolate milk sitting on the seat when I pick him up, he goes, oh, thanks, Mum, love you. All of a sudden, me and chocolate milk is nothing to do with the environment whatsoever, and everything to do with love. And you could say, well, that's cupboard love. and that's not okay, but that's my boy. Cupboard. Oh, that's what my mother used to call when you cupboard love is when you just love someone for what they'll feed you. Yeah. Wasn't meanie. So yes, right? And so this was just quite a long-winded way of saying the thing you think will almost certainly not be what's driving their behaviour. And if you talk about the thing you think and the thing that matters to you, you won't get them. Because if you talk to me about single-use plastics and not buying chocolate milk, I would have felt really guilty because I know that already. Information is only the solution if lack of information was the problem. I know this. And you just would have made me feel guilty because this behaviour that I've got is dissonant with my beliefs. And because I feel guilty, shame is a huge driver. I'm just going to stop listening to you because this is not convenient for me, right? So you have an unintended consequence of actually making me not want to listen to you, even more than before. Whereas, if you can use some of the tools of social marketing, then maybe you'll find a way to replace that. You'll either decide I'm not your target audience and move on to somebody else, which would be valid because there are lots of people out there, or you would find a way to give me what I need, exchange theory, right? Give me another way to do the thing that I need and have my kind of psychic needs met while not buying that plastic. Or you'd also just figure, okay, this is a moment in time. He's only going to be that age for a couple of years and then she'll stop buying it, which he was only that age for a couple of years and I have stopped buying it. So, yeah. But you get the point. And so here's just a little thing to think about. It's so tempting in communications world to give people advice, to tell them what we need them to do. What about if instead we solved their problems? What is the problem you've got, not what's the problem I've got? And how can I find some common ground where what I need solves your problem? Yeah. All right, last thing I want to talk about is taking a strategy and a systems approach. So, I've said we need to focus on behaviour. What is the action we want? What do we want people to do? And I've said we really need to understand the people we're dealing with and all of their depth and all of their complexity and all of their humanity and not judge them. And then we need to think about what is the system that this behaviour exists within and what is the strategy we can deploy to achieve our end goals. They're two kind of distinct but connected ideas. So the first thing I want to talk about really is strategy matters enormously, particularly for us in the public and community sector, because we never have enough money to do the things we want to do. And that means we cannot afford to not be clever about it. We cannot afford to just throw money around. We've got to be laser focused on what is the best use for our resources, for our limited resources. And I was at a social marketing conference in the States one year, and Alan Andreasen, who's one of the, another one of the kind of the big guys of marketing, said Gillette paid $100 million that year to launch a razor, and we get $500,000 to wipe out AIDS. And that was his reality. This is a few years ago now, right? But put that into any context you want. The people selling the cigarettes have got a whole lot more money than the people trying to stop people from smoking. Yeah, the people creating the social problems have got a whole lot more money than the people trying to resolve the social problems out there in the community. So that is a very sad reality, and it means we have to be super, super clever and careful about how we use our money. And one of the most important things is to be as strategic as you can. Don't leap to a solution. The solution you leap to will not be the best one. Your first idea will not be the best idea. And so use all your excellent strategy techniques, and the Community Comms Collective has had really good, all of those things we know about comms strategy matter here too. Really thinking deeply about what we're trying to achieve and what are the resources that we've got that we can bring to this fight and what are the things that could stop us from being successful and all of that. I always love a good Sun Tzu quote, and what he's saying here is take the time to really deeply think about the problem before rushing to execute a solution. And it's true in social marketing and behaviour change as well. System can both work against us and work in our favour. Think about the system that you're in. One year I was working with ACC, who kind of all of a sudden realised that alcohol was causing a lot of injuries, and so they thought, oh, we better do something about alcohol, and they decided that they wanted to do something to do alcohol moderation. Well, there was an organisation that was funded by the government in the community called ALAC at that time, and their whole job was alcohol moderation. And so really the important task for ACC there was to connect up with the system and not try and duplicate what's already going on out there. So what is the system that you're in? What are the levers for change within that system? How can you make 2 + 2 add up to more than just 4 within the system? Can you solve multiple system barriers to create the behaviour change that you want? And what are the communities in the system that you can connect with? But also, what are the aspects of the system that are unhelpful, that are reinforcing the behaviour that you want? And how do you work with those? We were working once with the Nelson Marlborough District Health Board, and they had this target audience of mums, lower income mums, and they believed that they had the power to put healthier food into their kids' lunch boxes, and that was what they wanted to achieve. That's not a bad behaviour to think about. I'm not against that. They did some research, and they found out, they kind of had it in their heads because they were judging them, that they weren't like very good mums because they weren't putting very good food into the lunch boxes. What they found was that the women knew fine, I get it, carrots. But actually they also knew that when they put carrots into their kids' lunchbox, the carrots came home uneaten. And these were women who knew that it was important for their kids to eat in order to learn, and they were desperate for their kids to learn to have a better life than they were having. And they also knew that they only had so much money to spend on food, and therefore wasting money on food, giving kids food that they're not going to eat, was just not helpful. So, to their credit, the District Health Board took a step back and thought, okay, what's the system that this exists within? We're not just dealing with healthy eating, we're actually dealing with poverty. There were also family violence related problems in there. We're also dealing with, like what's going on in the schools and all that sort of stuff. So they took a step back and had to think about what is the whole system that's impacting on this, and how do we influence that wider system. Everything we do, we can think about the system and not just ourselves as isolated kind of entities in that system. Community sectors are really good at that, and much better at that, I would say, than the public sector, to be fair. The last point I want to make on this is deploying an integrated program. Back to Ed Mayback, he used to talk about big messy programs. It doesn't have to be big, but just the point is, don't just have one point of contact, don't have one thing that you do, because ubiquity is massively important for catching people when they are finally ready to change. If you ask people to change once, they might hear it, it might even make sense to them, but if you ask them multiple times, eventually they might hear it. It might come at a time when they're able to make the change. And so that sense of ubiquity is really important. Another phrase that Ed uses a lot is simple, clear messages repeated often by a variety of trusted sources. Simple, clear messages repeated often by a variety of trusted sources. So these are good aspects for an integrated campaign. So just to really quickly summarise, and I'm glad to say we'll still have time for some questions if you have any. So these are just the things I talked about, right? Behaviour focus. What is it that we want people to do? And or what do we not want them or need them to do? And what do we not need them to do is also try not to be extraneous. Don't ask too much of people. Remember, people have really busy, complex lives. So that thing that you think you need them to do you really need them to do it, or could you narrow it down or just have one thing or something else? Audience orientation. What do we know about why they are behaving in the way that they are, or not behaving in the way that they are not behaving? How do we know about who is most likely to adopt the behaviour that we're after? And what do we know about their lives and the context and the communities that they live in? What strategy will we use and what tools can we deploy? What else is going on that can either get in the way or help us with that? Who else is active in this space and how can we collaborate for change? I had one more thing I wanted to just note. If you're really interested in this topic, there's a couple of really good communities. One here in Wellington, which is the Social Marketing Network. It's free to join. If you look them up on LinkedIn, they're kind of hard to find, but I've put that link there and it's in the presentation that will come around. Free to join, free events and resources, and awesome community people working on this kind of stuff who just really want to share. And then there's the Australian Association of Social Marketers, not free to join, but they have some cool events in Australia, and you can at least check out their website for their resources and stuff like that. And although it's Australian, and we sometimes like to dislike them, they're right there, and it's a useful kind of network to be connected to. So I think that is all I had for now, and so. Questions?